Tonight, an 8-year-old kid is handcuffed by a school resource officer, and the sheriff says, hey, I support him because it's totally legal. But the ACLU, they disagree, and they're suing. Who's right? Well, we'll show you the video for yourself and let our legal panel debate it. Then, controversy over body cams for the NYPD. Commissioner Bratton, he wants cops to see the footage before they give statements to investigators, but should they be allowed to do that? Also, police have a new high-tech surveillance tool. It's called the Stingray. What it does is it lets police capture cell phone data, let alone law enforcement, even on the federal level. And here's the kicker. They don't even need a warrant. Privacy advocates, they're flipping out, and lawsuits could soon start coming down. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will begin this evening with a lawsuit over this 8-year-old child who was handcuffed at school.
Now, you can either behave the way you know you're supposed to, or you suffer the consequences. If you want the handcuffs off, you're going to have to behave and ask me nicely.
Now, the ACLU suing a sheriff's deputy in Kentucky for restraining that child. The suit says the child had ADHD, so when Kevin Sumner restrained him, it violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sumner says the kid tried to hit him, so he had no choice. Remember, again, this is an 8-year-old. The sheriff, thank you, issued this following statement, though, in his defense. I steadfastly stand behind Deputy Sumner, who responded to the school's request for help. He did what he is sworn to do and in conformity with all constitutional and law enforcement standards. All right, let's get right into it with our legal panel. Doug Vinois, founding partner of Carson Vinois, focusing on corporate misconduct, selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the entire country. Jim Kasuris, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations both in Queens and New York. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And Mark Furnish, a professor at Brooklyn Law. He's also argued all the way before the U.S. Supreme Court. All right, gentlemen.
The ADHD didn't stop me, Rich. I got there with it.
All right. First off, before we say what's right and what's wrong, let's get into what's legal and what's not. We've seen these stories before. What is a law enforcement officer supposed to do? I know the kid's 8 years old. I know he weighed 53 pounds, something like that. But legally, is he allowed to restrain the child?
Legally, if his parents put him in handcuffs around his biceps like that, that child would be taken away from the parents. The law enforcement officers are authorized to use the reasonable amount of force necessary to do their job. Here, unless he's claiming he's afraid of this young child here, there's no reason to put that child in handcuffs.
But he hit him, Mayo. The 54-pound 8-year-old hit him.
Let me tell you something. I wish I had the ADD defense when I was a kid to tell the principal, to tell my father, if you take that strap on me, I'm calling the ACLU on you.
Okay,
so you
but
just
Mark,
watch yourself,
but Mark,
Dad.
we've seen other cases where if you now the police are called to the school, they don't just roll up here and say they're going to do it. In this particular case, what is the cop supposed to do? Is he supposed to turtle? And what if the kid's not 8 and 53? What if he's 10 and 85 pounds? Where is the line between you take it versus you do something to the kid?
Well, the line isn't clear, and that's why the suit has absolutely no chance of succeeding as it's currently pled. Let's be clear about what's being alleged. The first allegation is that they violated the child's Fourth Amendment rights. We talked on the show a couple months ago that there are currently no special protocols in place for dealing with mentally disabled adults. There's certainly no clearly established precedent on how to discipline an ADHD adult child, assuming that this guy should have known he had ADD. The second cause of action claim is alleged under the Americans with Disabilities Act. As I understand the law, there's a requirement of a municipal pattern or practice to establish liability under that theory. There is
Translate what that means.
Well, that means there has to be an official or unofficial policy sponsored by the deputy sheriff's office. Now, let's be clear about this. There's a Kentucky law in effect on the books that forbids them from using mechanical restraints like handcuffs. That law didn't go into effect until 2013, and just because it's a violation of that law doesn't mean it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment or the Americans with
Except
Disabilities
the sheriff
Act.
said that he stands by the conduct, so we don't know what the policies are of that department. Those policies may say that this is exactly what you're supposed to do, in which case they may have an
Right,
actionable
but saying
issue
that
there.
after the fact, when there's a suit pending, doesn't amount to a de facto pattern and
No, his
practice. And wait,
statements won't, but the policy and protocols themselves, the handbook will.
But is it not excessive force? I mean, when you look at that video, we know what was going on.
It sure didn't look.
Well, we don't know
he
what was
put,
going on.
Well, you do. The cop put the handcuffs on to scare the kid, to teach him a lesson. He wasn't going to arrest him. He was going to take them off.
Well, he was in
kid
the principal's
acting up.
office.
The kid was acting up, so this is the way the
He
cop
was.
decided that he was going to scare the kid into submission.
And if you hear
It's
more of the
excessive.
dialogue, we didn't have time for it, but he said, you didn't listen to me, you didn't follow my orders, you didn't do whatever.
It's
so he
not
was-
up to him.
It's certainly not helping him. But on the same end, Doug, you can see, God forbid, they were afraid, let's say, for not only the kid hurting someone else, but also hurting himself. And they didn't restrain the kid somehow. Okay, I'm playing devil's advocate. Imagine if that was one of our kids, what we'd do, right? That said, if the kid hurt himself because he wasn't restrained, wouldn't they then be able to go after the police department and say you didn't properly take control of the situation and ensure the kid's safety, let alone others?
Well, maybe, but I think the bigger question here is, why is a police officer at a school with an 8-year-old? I mean, we all say, look, he's doing a bad job. He's not doing what
it's a
he's supposed to
special
be doing.
kind of police officer they have there
It
that's
doesn't even
assigned to the
matter.
school.
You have this child presumably has parents that are supposed to be watching after him. He presumably has a teacher that knows about his condition. Why is there now this third party that's brought into the situation?
They called them in.
Right. Well, that's my whole point.
Yeah.
So now you want to critique the guy after the fact, but this guy is pulled in, and you're asking him, well, here are all these problems that society doesn't want to deal with, but now you show up and you deal with them. And he kind of makes a fool of himself, I guess, but you know what? He's trying.
And you know what? It's brought up a larger issue. And Mayo, I'll bring you back to your former life. We've talked about, not just on the show, but also when I do this as policy, cops are expected to be drug treatment officials. I mean, with the explosion of heroin, for example, through this, they have to carry Narcan now and literally be life-saving agents when they come on the scene to treat overdoses. The amount of mentally ill that we no longer house, we just put out on the streets, they now have to deal with that. They have to deal with so many situations. Now, I'm not condoning this officer's behavior. I think he was a meathead, frankly, about how he handled this thing with a little kid here who clearly had problems.
No, the ACLU says he's part of the problem of the school-to-prison pipeline, that this incident is a contributing cause to the school-to-prison pipeline. That's,
Okay.
that's what the ACLU
But
says.
what I'm getting at is we're diagnosing, we're doing a better job about identifying, especially with children, people who have needs, etc. But there seems to be this gray area about, as Doug said, what to do with it. And now you've got somebody that was diagnosed, you have somebody who's unqualified to come in there to properly handle the situation. It seems we're going to have more and more of these issues, of course, now with cell phone cameras as ubiquitous as they are.
But that gray area applies more to circumstances that present a situation like that.
Yeah.
If you have a mentally disturbed individual who's acting up and you bring a cop in there, I get it. But it's just wrong to take an
It's wrong, but
8-year-old
that
kid
doesn't mean it's a
who's-
constitutional violation
and
or
I
that
hear
there's
you.
a remedy for the wrong.
I hear you, but it is excessive force. There should be some form of
How's it
discipline.
excessive force
Oh,
if
come
you
on.
put him in a chair
No,
and put
come
loose
on.
handcuffs
The kids-
on his
What?
1-inch
They weren't-
string bean?
No,
by
no,
the
but
way?
wait.
How is
I'll
that
say what. Hold
excessive
on.
force?
Time out. The point that I think everyone misses out of this is, it should have been
15
it
minutes.
should have been illuminative
It's a
to everybody.
glorified timeout.
Oh,
is
my-
what it is.
You had an interesting childhood. So my only point is, it should have
That's
been like
mild compared to what I endured.
It should have been a note that the handcuffs couldn't fit around his wrist. So what does he do?
They
He
pushed
puts
it
them
up
behind him
on
and
the
goes up
bicep.
to his
Richard, to
shoulders.
your
No,
point.
That
on his
should have said
bicep.
we're overreacting a little bit here.
Thinner
To
than
your
his
point,
wrist.
Richard, though, and you go back to what Doug said, and Doug hit it squarely on the head, is that what we're doing is we're asking police to do things that are not in their job description, and a lot of that's because we are not willing or mature enough to realize that you have to spend some money for certain things.
No,
So if
this
you
was
have
his-
a
if
child,
anything, I think it cuts the other way.
if you have a child
this is his
who has
specialty
if
dealing
you
with
have-
children. He
if
should
you
know.
have a child who's special needs, not every teacher is qualified to teach that child.
He's
if
an
you have an
ex-teacher. He
autistic
became a
child,
special child cop.
if you have an autistic child,
did.
not every teacher is prepared to handle that child. So you have to have the proper classroom, at least where that child can be, and then you do have other disciplinary
see,
issues that you want to consider.
I just think that honestly, this discussion
53
is
pounds.
inapplicable. He could have done 1,000,001 things to calm the kid down, to scare him, to tell him, I'm a police officer, you act like this, you know, when you
He's
get
got
older, you go to
ADD,
jail.
he's bouncing
There's
off the walls. That's not
but
gonna
that's
work.
the thing.
He's already in the
They
police
did
office.
say the people,
Principal's
the
office.
video that was taken
The-
was from
the school took
Hold
it.
on. The nurse herself saw the situation was escalating. She thought it was enough of a problem.
Right.
She started recording. For 15 minutes, the kid was crying, cuffed, and in fact stuffed in
It's
the room.
wrong,
It
guys.
just
Come
doesn't.
on.
It is wrong.
Oh,
I know
he's
your
scarred
point,
for
though.
life now. He's going into prison because of this. This is the school prison pipeline in action. The ACLU
It's
said
an
because of this
overreaction.
horrible. Yes, it's an overreaction.
I understand that, but you can't tell me that the way he acted was right. This is not about mentally disturbed people and cops coming up there. It's just not about that.
And-
It's about an 8-year-old and a cop who just figured
And
he would
by the way,
exert
This is
this-
his job.
Oh,
Seriously,
by
he
the
should
way,
know
That's not
better.
his
but
job.
Mark,
Exactly.
but
He
Mark,
should know better.
let's be honest. Any one of us, if it was our kid, our nephew, or
Well, that's why I
whatever,
don't have kids.
it
I'm
would.
choosing what's going
Do
on.
you imagine Mark going into that room, seeing his 8-year-old scream with his hands behind his back? Forget about
I would have
lawsuits.
said good for him.
No,
Thank
you
God
wouldn't
you
have.
did it. Thank God you could do something.
We
like
would
this.
still be the four of us peeling you off the walls. Anyway, okay, next subject. Body cameras and dash cam videos, they're playing a huge part in many high-profile cases we've been seeing lately. But the question is, should the officers at least be privy to those videos before they have to speak to investigators after one of these situations? I'll tell you who thinks they should. That's the New York Police Commissioner, Bill Bratton. We're going to be talking about that and the controversy straight ahead.